Welcome to Wednesdays with Willa. I am your host, Willa White, and this is my weekly podcast show that airs live on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium. It's an opportunity for me to have a spiritual conversation with a lovely guest, and we talk about a spiritual topic, usually relating to spiritualism, mediumship, healing, faith, family, and more. And today, as my special guest, I have with me Joseph Shiel. Hi, Joe.
How you doing, Willa? Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yes, Joe's been on the show before, and he is a spirit medium and also a spirit artist and poet. And he's going to be sharing some wonderful views and understandings about mediumship and spiritualist principles. Such an
Mm.
important topic, no matter what day and age we live in. And before we get into our topic, I need to mention this does go out on Lilydale Radio. If you want to access that, that's a listen only feature. It's blogtalkradio.com/Lilydale Radio. And there are other Lilydale Radio programs that you can tune in throughout the week on different hosts and topics. And I encourage you to take a look at things there. And also on the lilydaleassembly.org website, they have a lot of workshops that are going up and also a summer program of events for 2021. So if you want to look back at the archived videos of Wednesdays with Willa, you will find Joe Shiel has been my guest before. And we've talked about spiritual things. And so you can type in Joseph Shiel, Willa White, and you will find us and be able to watch to your heart's content. This also goes out on my YouTube page. So you'll be able to find it in a lot of different places at your leisure. So without further ado, we have our topic, mediumship and spiritualist principles. And I know when we talked about this particular topic, Joe, you were talking about the fact that when you have those solid principles, that solid, the solid mediumship, that is a sound foundation of our spiritualist principles, that one feeds into another. So let's explore that today.
Well, okay. It's my contention that when I was out kind of trying to figure out what was going on with me as far as mediumship and as far as my abilities and kind of a novice at what I was doing because I didn't know exactly how or why I was able to do what I was doing. I was also searching outside of the religion of my upbringing and I searched a number of religions to if there was a community that I could belong to or be a part of. And when I came across uh, spiritualism, it began to entice me a little bit because of the interest in mediumship, but more because they had this set of principles that said that there was some kind of guide or pathway for life, for living, that could bring me, a clean and a meaningful life, if you will. And maybe I needed a little bit of taming down at the time. I don't know, but I needed something solid to walk upon to get across this rough sea of life, if you will. And each one of those principles meant something to me. But over the years of being a spiritualist and watching that different churches had kind of used different words to explain the essence of these principles. So some of them sound differently than others. Some of them, some churches have principles that are actually almost interfering with each other because they're just incongruent with each other, if you will. And then there's other churches that have them set in a way that is a little bit more like the old religions of control, like you do it our way or the highway type of thing. But it's really the general principles that I felt were an opening for us, each one of us, to build upon our spirituality and our spiritual life. And not to just be willy-nilly all over the place, but fall for something and fall for anything, that type of thing. It was no, we have a reason behind each principle and how we unfold who we are and become who we can be. And almost as if there's not only a calling for each one of us to explore the gifts that we have, but there's a reason behind those gifts that bring us to a fruition of understanding our own spirit and our own soul. And so what becomes to some churches is unimportant, which is like the mediumship. Okay, well, that's too much like a show, or that's too much like this. We don't want it in our church. I thought was kind of a tragedy in things, because in spiritualism, unless we have real evidential kinds of mediumship, real strength and evidence behind who we're speaking to on the other side, beyond, say, psychic messages or simple messages, we we end up getting kind of floaty and out there. We need to kind of concentrate on the reality of that continuity of life. And when we know, we come to know. Okay, so we may not believe when we first sit in the church. I know I sat there looking at the first ministers and mediums that I were watching. I sat in the back row of the church in what I called denial aisle, and I was like like sitting back there like this. Okay, go ahead and prove it to me. Nasty old man. But anyway, as I tried to see what would happen, you know I found a lot of them wanting. I mean, it was like, oh, they would say something, can I come to you in the back? And because I was wearing work boots, I liked the outdoors or something. It's like there was observation, there was intuition, there was manipulation. There wasn't the reality. And then as time went on, I started to meet who I believe to be real mediums. Honest about their work, making the effort to really have communication between this side and that side. And it's only through what, Stephen Upton from Arthur Finley says, I got this one from him anyway, an overwhelming body of evidence. It was through an overwhelming body of evidence that I came to believe and came to say, wait a minute, there might be a lot of people struggling with this or not getting exact or working on it, or maybe misinterpreting it. But underneath all of that, there is this science, this philosophy, and this religion that says we believe in God as their first principle, but there's a reason why. See?
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
so instead of just, oh, we believe because we're sheep and you said so, so I guess I'll follow you. We believe because we've actually experienced the presence of spirit, the presence of a more godly understanding, the presence of an overwhelming creator, if you will. And it's through that experience, in our own experience, as we work upon our psychic ability, our mediumistic ability, as we go to church and we understand the things going on in the church, and we begin to write, we begin to debate. All those beautiful things that we do begin to bring us around to saying, something, there is a loving God and there's beauty in this world, no matter what. No matter what the ugliness of going on, no matter what the horrors of life, no matter how many people are suffering, we have an opportunity to show the hope in things and the distance that we go, that we were spirit, that we are definitely spirit right now, and that we will be spirit continually. And this experience, this life experience of where we're at right now is an opportunity, not a tragedy, not a chore, but an opportunity. And so we begin to see how this spiritualist understanding, these principles in their basic form, begin to not only encourage us to see the best in us, the highest and best in us, but lead us forward, call us forward to be a part of the whole and to be part of that creation. And that's when this religion becomes so beautiful. It's not
I
about playtime or, there's certainly a lot of wonderful people and a lot of wonderful community in different churches around the country, and I've been pastor of some that I believe the people are intelligent, they're warm, they're loving, they're caring, they go forward. I was pastor at Swampscott Church in just north of Boston, and young people in that church and wonderful folks that are, really working hard at becoming a community of strength, and they're involved in the community. They're not just behind gates or behind something. They're actually coming out, if you will, and they're not afraid to say who they are or what they're all about, because we're at the point now that we must come out as spiritualists to encourage the world to see the path of this and see how wonderful it can be for our lives. We're not forcing anything down anybody's throat. Take this or else, or we're going to shun you, we're going to put you aside. Or it's not that kind of control. It's not a social ministry of, if you will, of we've got to get a hold of this community type of thing. It's more of encouraging people to be personally responsible, not only for themselves and their own behavior, but personally responsible. Another one of the principles, personally responsible for loving each other, which means, go ahead.
Joe, I just want to pause you there. I think it's important for people to know that when you're talking about spiritualists, as you were saying, that we believe that God is all there is and that we know it. The important distinction for spiritualists is it's not just about having blind faith that God exists, but it is an interior knowledge, deeply understanding that God exists in our lives, and that is the foundation of all. And that's why it gets to be the first one.
Right.
So I think I just wanted to explore that a little bit more, so people would understand where Joe is heading with that, why that's an important facet of our principles, and for then understanding the other things that come with it, the spiritual natural law, and being in accordance with the law and the divine.
Even the nature of some of the things I grew up with were more like, I'm looking out there, I'm looking up into the great heavens and the great beyond for God, or for something to oversee and take care of me, And so I'm constantly looking out into the stars, and which is a beautiful thing to do. But this is more of a journey to another infinite possibility, and that is within the worlds and galaxies within me, within ourselves, that connect us to everyone and everything that is in existence. And when I look
cosmic, you're going infinitely inward and infinitely outward at the same time.
It's by going in that we get to the lens where we see the reality and love of the entirety. Okay, but coming in here is really the most important, and it's not about being reclusive or separating. It's actually, this world is what separates us, and when we're separated as human beings, we begin to clash and crash. And this is the human existence. This is the human experience. We come against each other because, oh, you're taller than I am and you're shorter than I am, or you're more beautiful than I am and I'm, you're richer, you're poorer, you're this, you're this, that, and we begin to separate from each other and have strife and struggle, and our human emotions get all torn up. But when we go within, we see the connection and the commonality of our spirit. And when we see that commonality, we come together. We then see through that lens that the world is one, and that all is one, and that person, whether they be taller, shorter, bigger, more beautiful than I'm, is just as important as I am. And I must treat them that way. So this is a way that comes to a calling of us to be higher and better, an evolution of a self to become the best we can be. And not at each other's throats or over here or over there, but something that brings us to real peace. And you hear me all the time saying, choose peace, because I do think it's a choice. I don't think it's something that just falls upon us. It's something that we say, I have different opportunities to handle this particular problem, this particular event, this particular tragedy. I can handle it by screaming and yelling and going crazy over it, or blaming everybody, or I can say, where is my peace in the midst of this? And by going within The lens can show me that path. It can open that path. Spiritualism offers us that. And so I believe that, the reason I became a spiritualist in the first place was I said, somewhere in the midst of all this, different principles that different people write and different ways people do their mediumship, somewhere in the midst there is the truth of life itself. And I'm going to follow that. So mediumship is such a beautiful thing when done with sincerity, that it can really bring us to belief in all of that. And so it's not about silliness or playtime or look at what I can do, or it's about experiencing real connection, real communication with those who have been here and done this already and understand. So it's a way to come to understanding and a love for one another.
And you're expressing that tapestry of life that we all belong to,
Mm-hmm.
and that web of existence
Right.
that we connect with, and that viability of energy between each person, even in the individuality, and that understanding of knowing we're part of a greater community,
Right.
a greater community of spirit that
Right.
brings us together and ultimately helps us to transcend that great mystery.
Yes, because we're living the mystery. We're living in the pains of yesterday. You know, we're we are. People think that mediumship and this type of church, it's all about death. Well, it certainly may be um, influenced by that, influenced by the death in the world, by people's tragedies, by hurt, by grief. But we're all grieving yesterday. We're all grieving what the losses of the loss of yet another day, the loss of yet what I could have, should have been, the loss of those things, of time, of just a mere opportunity that may have been missed. There's a loss of just those moments that were genuine and pure. And now where am I? So every morning we wake up, it's like, now where am I? Now what do I do? And instead of knowing that this is a consistent experience that I go forward and I have responsibility for. So what do I choose to do today? How do I choose to face this? And in a time like right now, where you and I, last time we were together, were in your house, and one of your first
It's
radio shows, I believe, and it was wonderful, and it's always wonderful to be in Lilydale and to be. But this was, now we're on Zoom, or we're on this Facebook Live or whatever the case may be. These, and everybody's doing this because we have to. And why? Because we've had more deaths in World War I and World War II. Because the death rate has grown, because we have a thing that's keeping us in fear of being together and being with one another. And whether that's real or imagined, it is certainly a reality that these deaths and these things are happening. So around us, we have grief everywhere. And now more than ever, it is up to spiritualists to practice their mediumship and to speak of mediumship as the healing it really is, and as the peace giver that it can really provide, and not be so flippant about it, or playtime about it, but to get real serious about the work you do, and and to be there for those people, because it may be their only opportunity to find the path away from that day of grief, that time of grief. And
it
it may be
is.
the only way to see light and see joy. And I can't tell you how many readings I've done over the years where the son commits suicide, so the father commits suicide, or the father commits suicide, so the son commits suicide. It's like we can beget the fear begetting itself. We can get the tragedies, and more tragedies come, or we can turn and face the light, and face the these principles in such a way as saying, I need to find peace. I need to see the truth. And through mediumship, we begin to support and build the foundation of all those principles and why they're real and why they make sense. Any taken out of context, any one of them like, I don't know. Let me think about that. There's no substance behind it. It's like, okay, that's what you say, but but you put solid mediumship behind it. You've got a foundation where you begin to build um, a house of holy. You begin to build a home within yourself of truth and understanding and patience and tolerance and love for others and compassion for the big picture. So we have a tremendous opportunity as spiritualists today to be spiritualist, not something else. And that's why I think it's really important to take another hard look at these if you are a spiritualist and say, where do I fall in this? How do I utilize these in my life? How do I impress? Because it really is a pathway of living. And I would say not just living, but to utilize all that's at my beck and call to increase the experience of this life itself and live, not only just live, but live well and live well within my soul.
So let's give folks an example of mediumship in the sense of talking through, even when we first meet with a client, there is that understanding and connection with their soul and their vibrational frequency. And then we move into prayer. And we set that sacred intention, that connection and alignment with God, and that God is a part of what we are doing.
Right.
And that mediumship is a gift of the divine to bring comfort and ease grief. It has so many understandings in terms of not just the continuity of life, but easing the way for people to let that light in again. And for some, they haven't wanted to smile, they haven't wanted to laugh because they have been deep in grief or anger or fear, or maybe even just a state of apathy. And what happens in those moments, they start letting the light in and they start to smile and they're in that moment of joy. And it's as if the clam that had been shut tightly is opening away, and you can see the light in them responding to the light of what is going on in the reading.
Right.
And you know that they are seeing that their loved ones transcend so-called death. And in those moments, so does the sitter, the client, transcends death in those moments and can be transfigured into a place of joy. And how often has it happened for you and for me where they say, I haven't smiled, I haven't laughed like this for so long. And now I know that I can, and that it will be okay.
It is in a way a permission to live again, because many times when we lose a loved one, and I know this well myself, is it's a death of us too. It's a loss within us. The world is no longer the same. Once that person leaves, once that person goes to wherever, but we begin to understand as mediums, there is a place, and it's right here, and it's only a thought away. And when we begin to see that, we are the beauty of mediumship is when a medium actually understands that they're not trying to prove anything or show anything, that they're not on a show. You see, they're not saying, oh, watch me and look what I can do, and the sitter just sits there observing, going, oh, wow, well, that's right, or that's wrong, or, like they're, like it's daytime television or something. It's like the medium who really understands these principles and places them into their work understands that they're inviting this person that's in pain, this person that is in struggle, this person that's in total denial into the process.
Oh, it's a
Come,
conversation.
come
They have
with
to be
me.
part of it.
Come with me on
Mhm.
this journey of discovery. Come with me and watch what can happen. Just be with me. And for the first time in a long time, because grief is a great liar. It tells you you're alone. It
Mhm.
tells you there's no more. It tells you that, oh, this is, and it almost mocks life in a way, because it's saying, it's like, oh, you know, this wasn't important, you mean nothing, and that grief is this horrible monster that wants us to believe that we don't belong, that we don't love, that we're not together, that it almost it I can know that myself, because when I was a child and I lost my mother at age 12, my anger was so enormous, so rigid, so I can't even tell you how upset and screaming, using words I hadn't used before to express my discontent and displeasure with this so-called God. Look what you've done. This war I went into with God, right? And that's grief smiling on my back, going, gotcha. I know that there's where the evil in this world is like, I've taken you away from the rest. I've taken you away from hope itself, you know. And a medium and spiritualism is an opportunity to bring us back to that hope, not to someone else's path, not to someone else's understanding, but to bring us to understanding. Not that I have to believe in some preacher and what they have to say, but that I experienced my own path of holiness and of a walk with a loving God that explains this in a way that says it's okay. I'm not really gone. I haven't really died. I'm right here. Have been, am, and always will be. And that's when the client, hearing those things, goes, uh, they're almost, the jaw drops, and the tears come, and there's a flow of cleansing of that. Wash away the grief and bring in the joy, bring in the possibilities. And that's why it's so important as mediums, and people that are seeking or working on this, or taking courses or sitting in circles. It's so important to know the truth of you and to speak truth to yourself. Never mind what everybody else is doing. What's going on with you? And how are you experiencing this? Is this healing you too? Are you in the midst of healing for the grief of your lost days? And when that happens, then a greater vision of these principles comes to mind, and how really powerful spiritualism could be for the world.
There is the element of spiritual unfoldment of a medium,
Right.
the attunement and working toward even mind, and being in that space of truth and joy, and knowing how to sit right there and stand in the gap, as it were,
Hmm.
between life and so-called death, to join those two worlds and to stand there and help other people realize that we all stand there.
Right.
We
It,
all stand there in the gap ultimately and make a decision on how we reference our world. And one of the things I always thought was interesting is that when they described sitting with mediums in the old days, they would duly note that they were experimental sessions,
yes.
right? Such an important word, experimental, that we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
We can't guarantee this or guarantee that. All we could do is guarantee that we will be present
Hmm.
in those moments
Hmm.
and make this a sacred connection.
Hmm.
Right. And I think that's the difference between a spiritualist medium and, let's say, just, any old medium, as it were. There's a different kind of context that we've seen to place upon the connection.
Yeah, and I think the difference is we talk about mediumship, and like you said, there's certain types of mediums, and there's actually other uh, forms of religion that actually use mediumship, and now the prophetic churches are growing leaps and bounds.
Oh yeah, the Tibetan monks. There's actually Tibetan people, that shamans, that do spirit work all over the
All
world.
over the world, all
They
over.
all have their own reference points for
Right.
these. Absolutely.
But with us and these principles, what happens is that the attunement or the baptizing into understanding or the initiation into this work sometimes comes out of pain, sometimes comes out of a curiosity that kills the cat kind of thing, that oh well, look out, and sometimes it comes because someone intellectually looks at it and says, nothing else makes sense, so I come to this. You know, there are mediums who are doing this work based on, oh, it's just energy. It's just energy. Well, no, it's not just energy. The science it's not just energy, because it is intelligence, because we're actually having a conversation in real time, not memories or akashic records that we're looking up or these types of things. Real time conversations with spirit who still live, and consciousness to consciousness, mind to mind. And
Mhm.
it's that shows the promise of a truly loving God. I give you this, and it's with you always. You always have it. But what happens to us as human beings, being human, we get distracted in a huge way. We get separated from each other. We get separated from the truth. We have so much we're doing or busy or want to be, and we don't take the time for that peaceful moment, for that attunement, for the baptism of truth within us. So I believe as we move forward with spiritualism, I think it's imperative that the mediums that are believe themselves to be spiritualist mediums really begin to carry the principles strongly with them and explain them, and why and how they can be a huge stepping stones in the journey, and invite the client or the audience or whoever you're speaking with to come with you. Not watch me, look what I can do, but why don't you just take a walk with me for a little while and ask me questions, talk the talk, do it, argue, I don't care. Be who you are. Be right now, because tomorrow you'll be grieving over what you did or did not say
Mhm.
yesterday. So today is the day that's most important to move forward. And I would say that to all my medium friends, around, and all my students and things, that it is so imperative to not just um, talk this, but it's imperative to walk it and to live it. you know you're a medium 24 hours 7 days a week. You're not always on, you're not always talking to spirit, but you are that walking example of what life can be, and the holiness that can be that's possible. And that doesn't mean you won't fail, you won't fall down, you won't make mistakes, you won't have bad days. It means that someone can see your effort, and that's what people want to be a part of, especially in a world that's so hard, especially in a world that's so separated, especially in a world where there's so much death right now. That's what they want. It's a place where I can find some sense in the mix of all this crazy. So,
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that, as we merge with those spiritual understandings, it strengthens not only our personal belief, but strengthens our mediumship.
absolutely.
And it's one of those things that when you're in a reading, it can be so surprising, the things that come through, as you can bring through, someone's father and describe them physically and their personality, and all of a sudden they throw an armadillo at you and you're thinking, what? Okay, I'm laughing now, why am I seeing an armadillo?
Right.
And the client says, oh, it's because on every family trip, if we saw something on the side of the road, we used to call it an armadillo. And on the way here to visit you, Willa, I called out armadillo. And I hadn't done that in years.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew my father was with me,
There you go.
because that was what he would do. So it's those
Yeah.
kinds of moments, those surprising, don't make sense to you moments.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
grief can blur the joy of time. It can we almost go into a state of shock, a state of a suspended animation, like and it's that odd quiet that comes over us, at the funeral or at the time of death, and the feeling of heaviness all around us. And yet there's all this light going on that's hovering there. And you know it's these principles and this mediumship that breaks it open and says, look, this is now, and we understand. However, there's so much more life to come. There's so much more life around you. Love does not leave. The body may go, but the love does not leave. As a matter of fact, it becomes more immersed within you. It you you know I'll give you an example. My dad and I butted heads more than I can say. Why? Because I was always in competition with my old man. I always wanted to, and he was a CEO and president of a bank, and I'm a 15-year-old snotty nosed kid. you know but I wanted to prove myself, be better than him. So constantly he'd look at me like, what are you doing, kid? Why are you doing this? Why are you competing with me? And one way, I suppose, it motivates me to be the hard worker, to be this, other things. But another way, there's a constant estrangement. And it wasn't till the end of his life that he began to see what I was doing, and I began to see the power and the value in what he was doing. And we were doing two different things: him being a banker and me being a medium, and an artist and a musician, and things that he just was like, he's got no time for that stuff. It's like, I got to work, I got to do this. So these two opposite types of personalities, yet very much loving each other as a father and son, battled, you know, until it came close to his passing. And he said, if I had to do it over again, I would be more like you. And then it's like, what? That never ever came out of his face. It brought me to tears, of course. And then he passed on. And as he passed on, I began to say, I wonder if this is going to be like my mom, because I never see my mom. She never comes through. I don't know what's going on with that. I'm still wondering. But anyway, my father would come through all the time. And not just with other mediums, but with me. It's like, wow, this relationship over the past 10, 11 years now, that since he's been gone, has grown in a way, not imaginarily from me, not some construct I want to be, but because of an interaction that said, enough of the self-loathing, and more of self-care. And some of the little things you used to say, all of a sudden I'm hearing them now, years later. You see, is that time? Is that just because I woke up? Or is it because there's actually a continuation of the love and the influence that he has upon me?
Well, I think it's interesting, as you were describing the relationship with him, I kept seeing, like two male deer with their horns clashing with one another, the young buck and the old one,
Well,
clashing over and over and over again. And then, I think that it can be that way, especially the ones that are different from us. We can feel them sometimes more than if we are of a similar vibration,
Right.
because we notice differences more than we notice similarities sometimes.
And
And
sometimes the enemies in life are our best teachers.
you listened to him even when you didn't want to.
Absolutely.
So that's how he entrained you in that sense.
Yeah.
But also, he was a communicator, so it makes sense that you would
Right.
hear him more
And
and
it's
hear
similar
his
when
voice.
you become a parent, and you never want to be like your parents, because, well, at least a lot of people don't, and so you don't want to be like your parents, and all of a sudden you start, correcting your child, and you hear your parents' voice coming out of your mouth, and you go, "Oh, wait a minute," So it's more than just the ingrained teaching or experience. It's now this intertwined love that never goes away. It's just always there. That connection is always there with loved ones, friends, family, people we worked with, and and people are often amazed in readings, and I love when this happens, when somebody out of the blue comes through, that they hadn't thought about in so many years, and they just come in, and there's absolutely a reason why they're there, you know and the message is, haha, I'm still here, and I'm still watching, and I'm still interested in you, you know, and it's just incredible. It sometimes is more moving and more special than, say, mom on the other side, or, because that's too obscure, you
Well,
know.
it's interesting how sometimes you're right. It's almost like if they've already had connections with their parents or the other
Right,
people that have passed, they kind of get to the threshold of, oh, yeah, hi, guys. It's just like, you take them for granted, like if they were living, right?
right, right, right.
And then other people show up and you go, oh. So I think it's human nature to some extent, but
It's
it
full of good.
shows how we do maintain rapport if we wish
Yeah.
with those that have passed, and that you can build rapport even if you didn't know them well, or if the relationship shifts and changes, like your father. you
Right.
know your rapport you've built up so much, and it just shows you, like, that one principle that we believe communication between all planes of existence is a reality, and it happens
Exactly.
in that
Exactly.
way.
It's
It's such a
there's the
powerful
difference.
principle.
And there's the difference about the belief in God, of being the sheep and just saying, okay, whatever the preacher said, that I'm going along with that, because that's, at least that's safe. They tell me if I do that, I'll be okay, So I'll just go and believe what they believe, as opposed to coming to believe in yourself through experience. So say you're the client and you come in, and like you said, you're used to getting mom and dad and grandma and grandpa. That's, they happen, they come every time, and then people begin to ask questions like, could you ask them, what should I do about my house? It's like, oh geez, here we go. So, and they want to ask that specific question, but then, Peter from high school just comes through, who you knew for a while, and he was madly in love with you, but you never really dated, but he followed you around like a chicken in the yard, and 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 you knew him, but he never really asked you up because he was too afraid to, because he was too shy, but genuinely loving, caring person, but he's never forgotten you. He was madly in love with you in high school. And here he is, he's passed on, and he comes into your reading. It's like, what? I haven't seen him in so 40 years, and all of a sudden he's here. And then you talk about some of the things that he did and what happened, and you have evidence of that this is really him. And all of a sudden, it's not about the house. All of a sudden, the house is, I already know the answer about the house. I knew the answer when I asked, Willa or Joe to tell me about the house. I knew the answer. That this shows me that, what the heck am I afraid of? Where is my fear if this is true? How else would she know that, or he know that? This is real. And all of a sudden, we have a faith that is experienced in a God, a loving God, that what the heck are you worried about? Stop worrying. Go with your intuition. Do what you want with the house, you know, because there's your answer. It doesn't
Well,
matter what you do, you're going to be okay.
isn't it interesting that you come to a point as spiritualists that it's not about taking a survey with a peanut gallery about what you should do in your life.
Right.
You have to ultimately listen to your own self. All you can get are their opinion of what they feel to be the best
Right.
way.
Right.
And they might have, well, this is what I think about so and so, this is what I say about this, but it has to be something. It goes back to the personal responsibility of the
It
individual
does. It does. And
to make that decision and to create their own life according to natural law.
mhm.
That ultimately has to be where they're at. But you're right, it's those surprising things. It's if people come in with expectations, sometimes those are too heavy. But if they go in and just allow it to unfold as the conversation will, there are surprises,
So
huge surprises
that's
that
why you
show
want to
up.
ask them to come with you, walk with me, come into this. There as I think mediums forget that the sitter or the person getting the reading is as important as you are in the process. You know, they're not just watching you as a sitcom. So they're involved here. So involve them, and have them be wholly part of it, because you walk together to the spirit world.
And sometimes
Without
it's
them, those spirits aren't coming. You
those
know,
people in spirit, they have their own agenda as well.
absolutely. We're
They,
talking
it's
life to
they have
life.
something they want to say.
Right. Exactly.
Like Peter has something to say for
Yeah, well,
for
spirit.
that person.
I tell my students, spirit doesn't have any room to come in if you're talking all about yourself, like look what I can do, you know. If you're so caught up on that, then where's the room for them to get a word in edgewise?
Mhm.
Sometimes it's in the quiet of your own heart and your own mind that you allow them to sit in your mind, but you've got to unclutter that place give them a place to sit. Give them a place in the office here, you
That's
know,
true.
and
That's true.
that really brings that light and that love to the situation. And, you know, when we begin to feel all of those things, that's where mediumship becomes the foundation of the spiritual path of principles, and gives the meat and the reality to the weight to what they mean and how they function. And that's why they're there in the first place, and no matter how they were expressed, whether it's eminent heart in Britain, and whether they're expressed one way or another, the essence of what they are and what they teach us and how they can guide us through is the same.
Mhm.
We
It is the same.
get away from the you know the dynamics of words are powerful. I get it. So we must re-look at them, rework them, see what might be more universal. However, um, the essence stays the same if you look hard, and that's what's most important.
And wouldn't you say that in some way spiritualism, through the work of mediumship and spiritual healing and that connection with the divine and moving into that understanding of spiritual progression being eternal and infinite, it really does help to, forgive me for this word, but prove other religions to some extent.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
it's,
I think you're right, Willa, because I think, again, if you're part of a religion that says read this and do this and come our way or else, you're a sinner, you're this, you're that, you're otherwise, then you need the mind of a sheep. You follow along because the tether is there, or the switch of this is whipping you into line one way or the other. With spiritualism, you must think, and you must think with everything you are, and at the last resort, hear words in your mind. It is coming to a knowing of your own holiness, of your own height, of your own spirit. And it's not following anybody, it's joining a forever soul, a spirit of oneness, an understanding that that every single person here is significant. Every person here matters. Good, bad, indifferent, sick, crazy, mad and angry, whatever. They all matter. They're all part of that tapestry. They're all part of the light and shade that gives us dimension in life itself. So we begin to really see things when we practice mediumship. We begin to see from those who've been here and done this already and made the mistakes. They got the t-shirt, okay? And they can tell us and show us and have the wisdom of guiding us to be more kind to one another. And
Yeah.
that's the beauty of this. Um, and, when we chose this topic today of principles, uh, in one way, it's like, oh, I don't know, people just read them out loud at church and they go through them. And then that, for the rest of the week, it's like, what did we say? What did we talk about? You know, and I just think it's almost important to incorporate them in a way into your thinking, into your own debate with self, and say, is this real for me? Does this work for me? Why does it work? Why doesn't it work? Why am I not doing this? What why do I object to this? Why do I like to this? And when I begin to ask real hard questions, I begin to find that journey inward, and that place into a place that really brings out the focus of, oh yeah, I'm a part of everything. Oh yeah, life is continuous.
I know we just have a few minutes before we end for today, but
Oh,
there were a couple questions that I see popped up
okay.
about this. One person is saying, if consciousness is not energy, what is it? And how does it move simultaneously with spirit? Is it contained in energy for the connection with the medium and leaves the frequency of spirit after the connection? There are a lot of questions here. And if science says everything is energy, how can consciousness not be also? Is this part of what science is exploring? So that's
Okay.
pretty lengthy,
I
but
think the misconception is that there is. Let's delineate what's what. Yes, consciousness is energy. It involves energy. Energy is the vehicle in which it comes, but consciousness is the intelligent or the creative mind behind it. So it directs the energy. For instance, if you have electricity in your house, you have a positive and negative, and you must hook them up in a certain way, otherwise the light doesn't work. And when you hit the switch, the light goes on. When you cut the energy off, the light goes off. And we are, to put it in simple terms, we are in essence a thought, because our thoughts really become things. So we are a thought before we become who we are. This world around us is a collection of thoughts that come to be. We have an opportunity to see that consciousness is a thought that comes into reality, and to what I would say experience. Okay. Now, these principles are based around that experience to bring us back to what the original thought was, that I love you, that I create you, that you are important and significant. And that's where consciousness becomes peaceful and understanding. There's no more argument at that point. There's no more debate. There's no more separating from the original source. Okay. So with, I used to be a builder developer. I built hundreds and hundreds of homes, and I had guys called electricians. Okay. There's no power in the house without it coming from the source into the house. Then all the lights go on. Okay. We too, as mediums, sit and connect to what? We connect to our own source, our own being, long before we see anybody, long before we talk to anybody. we must go to the source and enlighten ourselves, be full within ourselves and ready for the switches to be hit and the lights to go on.
Mhm.
Okay. So I hope that helps
Beautiful.
answer the question.
I think so. I think it's a beautiful understanding, and it's the awareness behind the awareness, behind the awareness.
The dream within the dream. Yeah. Yeah.
that goes on, and the energy is I would say a response to consciousness as well,
Right. Right. Right.
ultimately. But that's beautifully shared. Um, any last thoughts you wanted to share, Joe?
I I think during this time where most of us, in one way or another, are affected by uh, the lockdowns and the time away from each other, and the necessity to wear a mask and distance each other, and the fears involved, and you know, the 6 o'clock news and the 5 o'clock news and whatever the case may be. Um, and I think I think it's really an opportunity to see how much you do love the people around you, and that if you can show that love genuinely to people around you in an honest and direct way, um, that it helps to move all of this energy and all of us into a better place. That we're not just going to be beat up and dragging once we have freedom, but that we're going to responsibly take on that freedom and understand this isn't just about me, it's about everyone around me, and I must be responsible to myself by being responsible to those around me. And what's most important, I think spiritualism um, has its struggles, it has its hardships, it has its misconceptions, and it certainly has its users, people who are using it for their own gain, their own fame, their own wants and desires. And I think it's time to just stay the course of your own truth, and that light will certainly wash out some of the dark intentions of others. So no worries, just love. Okay.
Just love.
Okay.
Good,
Thanks.
good.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I appreciate you coming on and talking about mediumship and spiritualist principles. It's always wonderful to have discussions. It's one of the things that's kind of like a hallmark of spiritualist thought exchange, that understanding
Hmm.
of having a conversation and finding common ground, and understanding that spiritualist principles are there for us to explore, and internally and also externally with others. And so I encourage everybody to take a look at the spiritualist principles of the spiritualist church near you,
Right.
and really meditate about what those can mean for you and for others.
Right.
So I encourage you to take a look at josephshiel.com is the
Hmm.
website, right?
Yeah.
And you can take a look and see he has a whole list of events and workshops and educational offerings if you
Hmm.
want to take a look at those things. And you could look at willawhite.com if you want to register for my mediumship development circle that starts on April 19th for 5 weeks. We'll go and learn more about spirit and the depth of mediumship that comes from having that understanding of spirit on a deep level, of the infinite.
Hmm.
So I'm excited about sharing those with you. And then in the next couple of weeks, you get to experience some more of the healing aspects of spiritualism. Next week, my guest is Christine Freeberry, and she is a massage therapist. We're going to talk about the power of massage
Ooh.
and the benefits for people who are in mediums and intuitives and healers, and why we need that too. And there's also the following week after that, on April 28th, I will have the vagus nerve and the intuitive health connection.
Wow.
So that'll be neat to explore. So there are healing aspects to what we do, and spiritual aspects to what we do that help us to be more fulfilled as mediums, as healers, and individuals. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Joe.
Thank
Wonderful
you.
to have you as a guest, as always.
Yes.
All
Take
right,
care.
you be well, everyone. Have a beautiful and wonderful week. Bye-bye.
Peace.